Well, I guess with good reason that they wouldn't want to make more people than should or ought to be involved with it. Now, the other side of it is, if we were talking about people feeling like they paid into the system, they're entitled to it, but you've, in a very short period of time, delineated some parameters that say there's much that needs to be done to actually qualify for. And before someone even qualifies, I understand they have to apply. You've given us a good deal of information already. I hear many people say, well, just waltz down to that office and fill out that form. That sounds very reasonable and sounds as though that's the way it should work. What I've heard in just 5 minutes here is that there's lots more that needs to be said. Question number one is, do those offices offer this information?
Well, go ahead, Lenny.
Yeah, I mean, yes, they do. However, I tell people, and jokingly, I mean, it's not really a joke, but I always tell people, if you want to go down and apply on your own, you're more than welcome to do so. The reality of the situation is that there is a tremendous amount of paperwork. It is a very lengthy process to go through. If you apply at the Providence office and you go down there with, the rest of the population that's looking to apply, you could be waiting 3 to 4 to 5 hours. I've had people go down there sometimes, they said, do you realize I've waited practically the whole day, and they didn't even complete the application.
That's what we've heard.
Yeah, it's incredible, but it is a lengthy process. But if you were to get an attorney involved, the practice for our office anyway, I can't speak to everyone in the state that practices this law, but what we do is, if we get a person who's in at the inception, typically we can set up the interview with Social Security. It can be done online, or we can actually conduct an abbreviated interview with the Social Security Administration over the phone. So at least that saves the person the hassle and the aggravation of having to fight traffic, look for a parking space, and wait 3, 4, 5 hours for your turn to do your application. Also, once we're in at the inception, we do certain things that we know that the Social Security Administration is going to be looking for markers in the medical reports that will delineate that this person has a permanent disability or is not going to be expected to work for at least 1 year or more. Those are the magic words, so to speak, that an examiner will be looking at to determine whether or not a person will qualify for Social Security benefits or not. The pressure is kind of taken away from the claimant, and we can kind of guide the case in the proper direction to maximize the person's ability to be approved. Because initially, in the first application, usually 80 to 90% of the people do not get approved. And then if they have to appeal to a reconsideration, your chances improve a little bit, but still it's about 70 or 80% of the people do not get approved at those levels. And the initial decision takes about somewhere between 4 to 6 months. So it's a lengthy process.
And Deb, going back to what you had asked originally, a lot of times people come in and say it's the forms that intimidate them. I've got to fill out all these forms, but it's much more. It's much more than that. That's the starting point. That gets the doors open, but it's really about the medical. Just like with workers' comp, Social Security is about what does the medical documentation say.
Absolutely.
And by having someone experienced, an advocate in your corner, now someone is helping, make sure that the medical that's being turned into Social Security says the things that Social Security needs it to say in order to look at their claim and hopefully approve their claim. So we always say that the client's medical is the key, whether it be any kind of an injury claim, a workers' compensation claim, or a disability claim. It's who the doctors are and what they say.
Well, you've clearly pointed out that it's not a user-friendly system, for one thing. Even that's one commentary. But the other side is, I've read that most, as you said, are denied, rejected. Is that part of the overall process because there's not medical documentation, or there are myriad other reasons? Namely, I would imagine if you have those kinds of forms, people don't fill them out properly. Is that what causes the rejection and denial?
Well, plus there's a significant burden. Just to think, you have to prove to the Social Security Administration, again, they look at your age, your education, your work experience, and your disability. But just in general terms, that you have to show them you're completely unable to perform any work. That's a tough standard. It's a tough burden for almost anybody to meet. And, as you said, most of the time the Social Security Administration will send out requests to get all these medicals from the doctor, but the reports come in unfiltered. There's no one asking the doctors oftentimes key questions about this person's particular limitations or whatever. The doctors are filling out some forms as best they can, but many of them don't understand the system. So it sort of all just kind of comes into a claims handler who's probably very busy, has dozens upon dozens of claims they're considering, and they go through the system. But as Lenny said, I normally tell people 80 to 90% is probably about right in terms of initial denials on Social Security applications.
Is it akin to the accountant who gets the shoebox full of receipts and is expected to sort through them? And if that's the case, I can see where easily it's stamp deny or reject rather than sort through them. Is it, when you point out medical, that means medical, it means psychological, it means psychiatric, and it could be from many doctors, not just one, and all of those things need to filter through that same system?
Correct.
That's pretty much correct. And, you know, it's, you know, unfortunately, with the Social Security Administration, I think it has the potential to be a great system. One of the things recently that's come across in the news is that Social Security Administration has requested that the government allocate, I think it was like $16 billion to try to administrate claims across the country. And unfortunately, between the President and the Congress, they couldn't come up with that much. So I think you'll find that many offices, especially in this region, are probably understaffed or in demand. So you're dealing with shorthandedness to begin with. To use your analogy about the accountant and the shoebox full of slips, I think once the attorney is involved, part of our job is to kind of organize that information for the claims representative or the claims examiner who's going to be reviewing it, and it goes to an agency called Disability Determination Services. The claims examiner actually sends it out for a medical examiner to review all the information. So, like Bob said, if it comes in unfiltered, unfortunately, a lot of the true points of what the person's disability may not necessarily come out. And unfortunately, what Social Security does in determining whether or not a person is impaired or not is they use adult impairment listings. And what those are it's basically it's a list of various ailments, so to speak, everything ranging from autoimmune deficiencies to orthopedic impairments that they will look to see whether or not you exhibit certain symptoms or problems that if you fit into that category, you would then qualify for benefits. The older you are, they use a grid system, they realize that it's a lot harder for an older person to be reintegrated into the workforce. So the burden is a little bit more relaxed when the person gets older, but the younger you are, it's harder. So unless you can fit into those adult impairment listings, most of the times you're going to be denied at the early stages, and it will require at some point to go in front of an administrative law judge to actually plead your case so the judge can observe the person, you know, in his courtroom and make a determination as to whether or not he or she qualifies for the medical assistance through the disability benefits or SSI benefits.
It sounds, just as we've touched on this, it sounds like there's quite a lengthy process, which you've made very clear.
Extremely, yeah.
Better that you start off on the right foot because it's going to take time no matter what. I think you've pretty much built that case. I think in our next installment, our next segment, we need to explore this a little bit further because from what you're saying between initial application, denial, rejection, reconsideration, hearings, etc., even with what you do, it sounds like there's much more that needs to be explored, and I think we probably will be doing that in the next segment or two. And I would say to our viewers that if you have questions, even though we will be entertaining more questions about this topic in our next segment, if you have questions, please feel free to email us at dbazar@abcglawfirm.com. And we'd like to thank Bob Audette and Lenny Cordeiro for joining us this time from Audette, Bazar, Cordeiro, and Grasso in East Providence. And as I said, we continue to invite your email. In the upcoming segments, we're going to be talking about various other topics, including landlord and tenant, the family court system, or the unfamily court system, specifically the particulars of divorce, and we'll have either Jackie, David Bazar, Lenny, or Bob with us, and of course we hope that you'll be joining us too, and our legal discussion obviously needs to continue. We really appreciate your being with us, and Happy New Year.